Welcome to, I guess this is a podcast. I'm sort of trying something new, I guess. Not really. It's all stuff I've done before, but not in this combination. I am here to save you. I am here to give you my recommendations for movies, shows. Hello, everyone. It's Pandemic Mitch here. As you can see from pajamas and not cutting hair and currently hiding away from the pandemic in my bunker, my fortification of movies and shows and whatever. And I am here to help you. I am here to give you a load of recommendations to carry as we try to stick through this very tough and very uncertain times. Because I've seen there's a whole bunch of videos, people doing recommendations online, Facebook, lists and all that. Oh, here's what I'm working on. Here's what other people are doing and all that. And I figured I should do my part and help. Here is my recommendation for movies and TV shows to watch. And it's very simple and very complex as much as you want it to be. You'll understand shortly, because my recommendation is to just watch whatever you have that you haven't watched yet. It's so simple, but yet it has so much that you could make it complex, Me, an avid Blu-ray collector, as you could see, I do have a decent amount of films. The problem I had, and this is before the pandemic even started, is that I would buy the movie, but then I wouldn't watch it until, years later or whatnot. And so with this pandemic, I've been given the opportunity of a lot of free time. Just looking for my collection, I'm like, this would be a good time to try to watch as many as I can. Granted, I've been putting my more YouTube editing type work first, and then whenever I have a tough day, or I felt like I did a lot of progress and I should take a break, that's when I have an opportunity to watch something. So that's what my recommendation is to just watch whatever you have, anything you have access to that maybe you wanted to watch or was interested in checking out, and just watch it. Like, for example, let's say hypothetically you don't really own anything collection-wise or any sort of movies or even digital, but let's say you have the internet and you have access to Netflix because or something like that, or some other streaming service, and take advantage of your downtime and watch the stuff that you want to watch, whether it's a TV show or a movie, or work with what you got. So I'm not really one for giving specifics of what to watch, because I don't really know you. I'm just talking through your computer or your laptop or your phone or whatever device you're watching this on, and I'm just talking to you directly, and I don't really have anything to work off of other than the people who are subscribed to me. I figure are somewhat interested in movies and maybe some shows or maybe whatever, or at the very least they're subscribed to me because they kind of like my personality, if I even have any. So I don't really have any specifics to work on, because usually when I have like a friend and I'm like, okay, I know what they like in a sense, I got a sense of what they like, And, so I could very easily make a recommendation off of that. Like, I have a friend who really loves history and specifically stuff with, Romans and that sort of time period of Rome and all that, and Caesar and all that, and history in general, the Greeks, whatever, Europe history and all that. So it's like, if he hasn't seen a certain movie, I would recommend. I'm like, hey, you know what? It may not be totally accurate. Yeah, maybe a little bit older Hollywood site, you know, big grand scale epic, just like, like I suggested to him Ben-Hur, because I'm like, this is and considered one of the best of the older classic movies. And it just so happens that I think that year they were showing in theaters for a month, for a special, return engagement for that movie. I think it was also maybe a new restoration or whatever. We went to the theaters and saw it, and he really liked it, especially the chariot scene, which looked absolutely amazing on the big screen. I worked off of what recommendation, but with this situation, I don't really know what you guys like or whatnot. So I can't really recommend, like, for example, I can't be like, hey, watch I can't think of a specific example. If only I had a list of movies nearby that I can. Like, for example, I can't be like, "Yo, watch John Wick," and be like, "Yeah, it's a great movie in my opinion," and all that. But you might not be one for action or violence or revenge, thrillers, shoot 'em up, kill the bad guy type films. You may not like that. So I feel bad if I recommend something specific, like Saw. You may not be a fan of horror films. I can go really generic and be like, well, everyone likes Star Wars in general. I mean, there's people out there who obviously dislike Star Wars, but I can go really generic and be like, well, it's fun for all ages, blah, blah, blah. Watch A New Hope, or The Empire Strikes Back, or, what. Well, obviously, if I was recommending Star Wars, I would recommend watching it in order. You see my dilemma. So I've done my recommendation. My recommendation is basically, if you have a movie, you've never seen it, and you have access to that film and you were interested in seeing it, just watch it. You don't necessarily have to just watch movies. If you're still working because you're essential and you're holding this world up together, with glue and whatever you can find, and you're one of many people, risking their lives day in and day out just so other people can have their supplies, or other people can, heal in hospital, and, firefighters and police and all that. I might as well say it here, but thank you very much for all you've done, and those who are on the front lines. So yeah, so if you have a movie, you haven't seen it, check it out. And hell, if you've seen a movie and you have it, but you've never checked out the special features, or maybe you don't really feel like watching a new movie, and so you have a movie that you've seen many times before, or maybe you've never seen it with the commentary, because some DVDs and Blu-rays, they have commentaries, the director or writer or somebody who loves the film. Like, for example, I have one of the Rio John Wayne movies. I forget which one. There was a couple of Rio movies with Rio in the title, and John Carpenter does a commentary for one of them, and I'm like, I think that's the coolest shit. So I'm definitely, that's on my radar to check out. Maybe it'll give you a new perspective. And I find some of the better commentaries, they have little stories and all that. Like, for example, on Baby Driver, there was in one of the, I think there was two commentaries, and I watched them back to back. Not this year, last year or so. And they mentioned there was a story, of how they had the opportunity, the cast, after a night of filming or a day of filming or whatever, to go see Prince live in, I think they were, because they were filming, I think, somewhere in Atlanta, and it just so happens his show was there, and that was actually one of his last concerts ever, because later on they found out, Prince died. And so it's just very interesting, hearing little tidbits, little stories like that. And maybe it makes you think, maybe not. I can't say all commentaries are great, because I'm sure there's some bad commentaries out there, but there's also probably a lot of good ones. If you're not a fan of watching a movie while people are talking over it, I don't blame you either, because some people don't like silent films. Some people can't stand watching a movie that's not in color. Like anything that's black and white, they avoid. I understand, but get the out of here. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. All jokes aside, I understand. You're missing out. I will say, like, if you don't like films in black and white, you're missing out on some great films. Uh, if you only watch films that are only in black and white, and you don't like any of the movies that are in color, you're definitely missing out on some good films. Next up, I'm gonna go through a bunch of movies that I have been watching myself and what I've been doing for during this pandemic. Stay tuned. This is where the commercials would come in. Brought to you by whatever. It's useful on everything. Whatever. I put that stuff on everything. Welcome back. I want to apologize in advance. I am sharing my house with my parents and my stepdad. And we're all one big happy family, except this house is a little more of a rental. So let's just say audio recording is not that great when a lot of things are going on in other places of the house. Currently, right now, my mom decided to put on the washing machine, the dryer, and the dishwasher upstairs. So any noise you're hearing, I hope it's because I turned down the gain on this for this video, so maybe it's not going to pick it up as much. We won't know until we find out later on. We've already established that I'm not really going to make a specific recommendation. So I'm going to catch you guys all up with what I have been watching during this year. Because, basically the pandemic started, technically, November of, last year or some time around that. So technically the pandemic was going on in January as well, in February. And I remember reading in the news and thinking, I was worried about it, January, and and then it's not until February or March that's when the countries that I'm in, or North America, basically was like, oh, now we should be actually a little bit worried. By then it's obviously a little bit too late, but we are trying to prevent it now by staying indoors. We are attempting to minimize risk of exposure, and by just not going out, and by only going out when you need a specific supply, or if it's an emergency. My job was not essential, so I did not. I think when in Ontario they said that only essential businesses are open. My work area is still open, but the problem is I was a contractor technically for another third party to manage the printers that are there. So on a technicality, because I wasn't technically an employee of the third party, because I was only a temporary, even though I've been working there 2 years. Talk about temporary. They had to let me go, and they had to reshuffle their organization, so all the people who actually do work at the company have to take over the roles. That company is still open as far as I know, and they're still going to work. It's just because I was a contractor, they let me go. But anyways, enough about that. I forgot what I was getting on to. This is why I generally don't do these type of videos, because I just feel like I'm just, I mean, you can see why I prefer scripted over unscripted. Though when you're doing an unscripted content, you're very much, you feel very passionate about whatever you're saying at that exact moment. But when you go back and look at the footage and editing, you're like, this isn't important. So as I go talk around these movies and TV shows, I'm gonna absolutely do my best not to spoil anything. So it's gonna be spoiler free. There are gonna be no spoilers in this video. I'm gonna do my best to not spoil anything, but to give a general sense of what I think of the movies or shows. So yeah, so basically this year, these are the movies and TV shows that I've been watching. I'm gonna start off with the TV shows because I've watched more seasons of TV shows in 2020 than I have in 2019 and 2018 combined. So I feel like I'm actually making some headway into the shows that I still need to watch and the ones I need to catch up on because I waited for them to release the seasons and all that. This year was very interesting because I started off one of my friends suggested to watch Troll Hunters, the DreamWorks Netflix exclusive TV show produced by, because they are a big fan of Guillermo del Toro, Guillermo del Toro. I'm sure they are just shaking their heads at this point. But they were a really big fan, and they showed me the very first episode of this, and I was like, oh, I kind of liked it. It was interesting. Definitely sort of had Guillermo del Toro style to it, and I can definitely see him being the major creator of this show. But then it wasn't until afterwards I realized that Troll Hunters was one of the last shows that Anton Yelchin did before he tragically passed away. And I was a really big fan of Anton Yelchin, and the fact I'm really disappointed that I looked at the first episode and I didn't actually realize he was voicing it, and I totally forgot that, like, because at the end of the episode, I think they show a little thing that says, like, in memory of Anton Yelchin. And the fact that appeared on screen, and I was looking right at it, and the fact that memory-wise, because my memory's not that great, the fact, I feel sad that I actually, for that whole episode, I forgot about Anton Yelchin, and even when I saw his name in memory, I'm like, oh, so that's a crew or a cast member that passed away. And then I was like, wait a minute, no, I got home and I looked it up, and I was like, wait a minute, no, that's Anton Yelchin. And I felt so sad that I actually, because it's been several years of Anton when he passed away, and I just felt so bad that I actually forgot. But I with a passion, I was like, okay, I need to watch the rest of it, because I really wanted to see more of his stuff, because I mean, he was a rising star, and especially in Star Trek definitely put him on the map. And I loved Fright Night. That, like, I haven't seen the original Fright Night, I just saw the remake, and I loved that version of Fright Night. Granted, it's the only version I've seen, but I was just, I really wanted to, like, another movie I really want to see is Green Room. I haven't picked it up yet, but I'm definitely really want to see that movie. But anyway, so with Troll Hunters, I was like, okay, I need to watch this entire series. And I did. So I watched season 1, season 2, and season 3 of Troll Hunters. And then realizing that it's kind of I don't know. I guess you could say the Guillermo del Toro cinematic universe or whatever for Troll Hunters, the Troll Hunter cinematic universe. I watched Free Below and Free Below season two. So that's 5 seasons of two different shows I watched right there. I'm super excited to see the Wizards show that he's going to do soon. They were a pretty good show. There's things I definitely loved about either Troll Hunters or Free Below. Um, Granted, it's not the you know Avatar: The Last Airbender of children's television, uh, but I liked it for what it was. I enjoyed it, and great cast for both series. The amount of voices that I recognized or name wise, I was like, wow. And then there was a show that been ranting and raving all over across the internet that came out called The Witcher. I saw season one of The Witcher. I thought it was great. But for me, as somebody who I never played the Witcher games, I never read the original Witcher books or anything like that. It was a little hard jumping right into this series because I felt they did not dumb it down for audiences, or if they did, it was still pretty advanced. The mythology and just they just bluntly, here is The Witcher, this is what it is, throws you into this universe. And I kind of love and hated it at the same time because I was like, because as somebody who's not familiar with any of these characters, I don't know what things mean and what they're getting used to the world by just getting thrown in is such a welcoming change of pace. I felt. I don't know if it's a technical twist or whatever, uh, in the terms of editing and the way they structured the show. I'm not gonna go into anything more than that. I just praise the show for what it did, and I would be interested in checking out season two. But for me, The Witcher, the big point was Henry Cavill as Gerard, and I just felt, I'm like, this is really the main reason why I'm watching this show is just to see his performance of it, and that's what it kind of was by the end of it. It's kind of the one thing that's kind of holding me on to the show, and so if second season he's not in it, I'm not watching the show. That's basically it. And just as a little note, I have not seen any episode of Game of Thrones. I have not, correction, I have only seen season one, episode one of Game of Thrones. And I decided I'm going to wait for them to complete, the whole show. And by then, when I watched the first episode, I think they were already on like the fifth season or something like that. They were a lot of seasons ahead when I saw the first episode. And so I decided, I'm like, you know what, I waited this long, I'm going to wait a little longer. And now the complete series is out. I just have to get get it for a good price, and then binge watch all that in one sitting. Oh man, that's going to be fun. So, in reference, I like The Witcher. It was done well. Season 1, Netflix. Not sponsored. Hashtag not sponsored by anything. And at the same time, I've been every now and then watching a couple episodes of Mork and Mindy. And so I completed season 1 of Mork and Mindy on and off. It's something light, something funny. Ron Williams is just completely owns the role as Mork. I can definitely see why Ron Williams was such a big star, just from that show. And I haven't really, like, I've seen 1 or 2 episodes of Happy Days, and I know it was spun off from a character from that, and I'm not too familiar with the Happy Days cinematic universe. But Mork and Mindy was definitely a lot of fun. I love the references. I love it because I knew going into it, I'm like, okay, so Ron Williams is the main reason to watch this show. But I actually kind of really like the stereotypical, not stereotypical, the simple sort of plot of, okay, they're in The place that they chose was Boulder, Colorado, I believe, and it's a music store. And I'm like, that's an interesting choice for sort of premise uh, of where the show will generally take place. And I was just shocked with Mindy's father and the music store and just all the references between the two. The I think grandmother and him, and just them going off of one of each other. Like the grandmother is always like, "Oh, I love, Grateful Dead concerts, music, the more modern stuff, Jimi Hendrix and all that." And then the father's just all about that classical music, and I love that dynamic. Like, it was unexpected. I didn't think, like, I was going into the show just for Ron Williams, but I just found that part to be a whole laugh and a half, and I can't wait to watch the rest of the show. Slowly making my way through that. At the same time, Mother's Day has come up, and for Mother's Day, my stepfather decided to give my mom, just for laughs to celebrate her, he gave her the complete series of Carol, or well, not complete series. It's the 50th anniversary set for the Carol Burnett show, because my mom has been very interested in, from seeing the clips online of the Carol Burnett show, some of the really funny clips, Harvey Korman and forget some of the other actors that were in that. And so we've actually, together as a family, sort of been watching the Carol Burnett show. But because of the way it's structured, episode wise, because they haven't done a complete series for the Carol Burnett show, and I was kind of shocked. Everything's been piecemeal. Like, if you collect all the DVD sets for the Carol Burnett show, the official sets, you will get double episodes. You'll get episodes you've seen from other discs and all that. It's all jumbled. It's all almost out of order in a sense, which is really unfortunate. It would be really cool if they could just try and get one complete set, but that's not the case. So I don't know if I would really count that as a season or not. We've only on like the third disc, but it's hilarious. The Carol Burnett show, I could see why that show was such a big deal back then, and what Carol Burnett has done for film and television in general with the show. And it's hilarious. I was shocked kind of some of the jokes that are in it and all that, and what they make fun of. That's all the TV shows I'm currently doing. Once I am done Mork and Mindy and the Carol Burnett show, I'm going to slowly try to work my way up through all the TV shows that I haven't seen yet, which is oh, look at that, I got coronavirus. Yeah, because my nose is running, because I'm sort of a little bit, I guess I'm having a bit of panic attack or whatever. I don't know. It's getting hard to breathe in here. The walls are caving in around me. Okay. So once I'm done the Mork and Mindy, at the very least, I'm gonna start pushing my way through all the shows that I've done a season or two, but I haven't really completed the complete thing. For example, I don't know which one I'm going to start off with first, but Attack on Titan, I've only seen the first season. I have season 2 and 3 now. Stranger Things, I have season 2, and season 3 is still on Netflix. They haven't released season 3 physically yet. Sherlock, I've seen the first 3 seasons. I haven't seen the one-off episode they did between season 3 and 4, and I haven't seen season 4 yet, but I have them. So as you can see, I have a lot of TV shows I have to sort of catch up on, and some of it I have to rewatch or would like to rewatch, just sort of bring me back before continuing on with the show. So we'll just see where it goes from there. Next up, I'm going to go through the movie section of what I have watched and what I'm thinking of watching next. It's so weird saying 2020, you know? I'm still getting used to saying 2020. It doesn't 2020, like, it doesn't work as well as 2010 or 2015, 2020. Yeah. This is the list of movies I watched in 2020 for the first time that was released in 2020. The first one I saw was 1917, which was amazing. Which, by the way, I know technically they did a couple of preview showings in 2019 for 1917, and I count this movie as a 2020 movie because I mean the wide release of 1917 wasn't until the first week of January. So on that technicality, I count 1917 as a 2020 film, not as a 2019 film. With 1917 coming out in the first week of January for wide release, I feel like 1917 should only have been nominated for the Oscars that happened in 2021. That's just me. Anyways, so that was amazing. Amazingly well executed war film in the style they were going for to make it look like it's all one take. Granted, we've seen it before with Birdman, but we've never really seen it apply to a war film, and so as a result, 1917 stands out. Granted, I saw the movie in D-Box, and I was a bit disappointed because I forgot with a movie that's all done to make it look like it's one take. I forgot that the camera is more stabilized because the guy running with the camera or using it, they want to make the cameras not as shaky and stuff like that. So it was a very smooth experience. So D-Box didn't really have much to work with, surprisingly, for a war film. That's sort of what took me by surprise. Haven't seen a lot of... actually, no, it was 4DX. It was 4DX I saw in 1917. I forgot because D-Box doesn't have the smell and the fog and the strobe lights and the water and all that. And the experience of 4DX for 1917 was actually... I felt was the worst 4DX experience I've ever experienced for a movie, in the sense that there's only two movies I've seen 4DX in. Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets and 1917. Out of the two movies, I felt I got a lot more out of Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets in 4DX than 1917. But don't get me wrong, it was still an interesting... The one... I would say jump scare with the movie that was amplified in 4DX. That actually I felt like I definitely had a heart attack moment. You know exactly the moment I'm talking about. It happens in the first half of the movie, or maybe even earlier. But it just oh man, I felt some real adrenaline in the theater there. The next movie I saw was Weathering with You, from the director and creator of and writer of Your Name. And Your Name was a masterpiece when that movie came out for anime, and it's one of my favorites, and it's so good. Weathering with You was okay. It was decent. I felt it was... I don't know if maybe it was trying too hard or it just couldn't live up to what Your Name was. But don't get me wrong, it was still a good film. Just not... It wasn't a great film. It wasn't an amazing film. It wasn't Your Name. So don't go into the movie expecting Your Name. Can't really say anymore because I don't want to spoil anything about the film, but yeah, Weathering with You was good. It was neat seeing in the theaters because they actually added on a interview with the creator. I think after the film. Yeah, it was after the film. And that was a cool little behind the scenes things, and I feel like it would be kind of cool if maybe certain movies they do that a little more, because for the limited release movies that don't really go wide, Weathering with You did, and the one from the year or two before, They Shall Not Grow Old, the Peter Jackson documentary. It was amazing that not only do we get to see the film in theaters, but we also get a little behind the scenes extra afterwards, after the credits. And I think maybe movies should start doing that a little bit more. It would entice people to go see it in theaters, you know? You get a little bonus, either a deleted scene or behind the scenes of one specific shot of the movie or whatever. Like, just something extra. I mean, movie theaters could start offering that. Granted, it would increase the runtime of the film, and the more bigger the runtime of the film, the less show times they'll have to show the film. So that's sort of the downside, but I just thought that was cool. Weathering with You had that little bonus feature after the film. And then I saw Sonic the Hedgehog, which I honestly think should be nominated for Best Picture this year. Nah, I'm just kidding. But anyway, Sonic the Hedgehog was great for what it was. Went in with low expectations, except for Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey was the only thing that I had high expectation for, and I think he just reached it. It might have still been a little bit too high of an expectation, but he still almost matched what I was looking for with Jim Carrey performance, and it wasn't a bad film to sit through, especially for someone who's a fan of, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Sonic, the third one, the one for Sega Genesis, and then you got, I really like I've always been a slight fan of Sonic. I've liked Sonic more than Mario, but Mario had better games, overall, I felt. Oh, did I just... Is that shots fired I hear in the background? It's hard to compete with Super Mario 64, Anyways, moving on. I then watched the longest title of 2020, Birds of Prey and the Fabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. All I gotta say is that was a bit of a mess of a film, but it was an enjoyable mess, I guess. Police scene was pretty cool. The police station. You know the one I'm talking about. Some of the choreography was pretty good in terms of action. And apparently I learned afterwards, I think one of the people who worked on John Wick worked on that movie for the action scenes choreography, so it definitely shows. But overall, I don't know. It's when it comes to the DC side of the universe for continuity or whatever. I don't know. Because I just recently rewatched a bit of Batman v Superman, Justice League, and Suicide Squad, and Suicide Squad is still a bad film. It's I don't know. I can't decide if Birds of Prey, Harley Quinn, Fabulous Emancipation is better or worse than Suicide Squad. When you can't tell if it's better or worse, I don't know whether to say it's I guess it's an improvement. I mean, in all honesty, it's rated R because of stuff that happens in it. So it is a rated R DC Universe film. So I'm, in that sense, I have to give the edge to Harley Quinn. The Harley Quinn Birds of Prey movie is slightly better than Suicide Squad just because it is rated R. And I mean, Ewan McGregor does a great bad guy performance. Yeah, okay. So now I'm thinking about it. Yeah, Birds of Prey was a better movie than Suicide Squad. Yes. But I had to think about it to figure out which one was better. It should be, I feel like the Harley Quinn movie should have just been instantly, yes, this is better than Suicide Squad, yes. But the fact that I had to actually think about it a bit. And the last film I saw in theaters was The Invisible Man, which I felt was a pretty cool way of remaking The Invisible Man for a modern day audience and turning the tables into pure sort of horror film. Because I mean, I love the Claude Rains Invisible Man. Claude Rains is one of my favorite actors, and in Invisible Man, total troll. Oh my gosh. But for a very sort of serious, dramatic horror take of the Invisible Man, this movie, I think I felt accomplished it. I feel like if anyone's gonna do a sort of dark cinematic universe, I feel like Blumhouse Studio, the horror studio, definitely would be my top contender for doing it right. And granted, it's still kind of stupid of an idea getting all the Frankenstein, Dracula, working together as like an Avengers types team up. Like that idea is still pretty damn stupid. So I don't even know how realistically they would be able to accomplish this. I feel like they would have to go pretty creative if they are gonna push for that. Haven't seen was it Dracula Untold and Tom Cruise's The Mummy yet. But from what I've heard, that's what they were trying to do, and I think they even had Johnny Depp as the Invisible Man, which I wouldn't mind seeing, but it definitely would probably be a bit of a waste of money. Could have probably have done, because once again, how do you get Frankenstein working together with the Mummy and the Invisible Man and the werewolf all together, Wolfman? It's like, it's a bit silly, stupid. I mean, it's awesome if for an action spectacle like Avengers, but it would be stupidly awesome. For a list of movies I watched in 2020 that were not released in 2020, I started off with Bad Boys because the third one was coming out and I wanted to watch the first and then the second one and then go see the third one in theaters. I never got around to seeing the third one in the theaters because I never got around to seeing the second one. So I've only seen the first one, and the first one was pretty good. I could see why it was popular. Well done enough. It stood out. I liked it. I watched Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, which I forgot I did see this in movie theaters in 2020, but the movie came out in 2019, so that's why it counts as not made or not released in 2020. Yeah, Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, that's a video on its own to talk about. Take 4. I then watched Little Women because Little Women was the very last film of the Best Picture nominees that I haven't watched. And so I was like, okay, I'll make an effort to go see it in theaters. And I thought it was a great film. And granted, I haven't seen any of the other adaptations. So for me, Little Women in general, whatever the original story was, that was a completely new experience for me. So I thought it was great for what it was. I don't know how much it's like compared to the other ones, but I thought it was a great film and it was worthy of its nomination for Best Picture. In fact, I actually felt all the Best Picture nominees for the Oscars this year, for last year, was the very minimum was great. Like, I felt like out of all the Best Picture nominees, critically and positively, like, the lowest score I could have gave any of those films was great. That's pretty good if all the Best Picture nominees are at the very least a great film. There was hardly anything weak, I felt, with the Best Picture nominees. But that's just me. I don't know what everyone else thought. Right, my mistake. I just saw the list. So Little Women wasn't the last one. It was the last one that I needed to see, that in order to see, you had to see in theaters. The last film actually for watching for the Best Picture nominees was actually Marriage Story. Oh boy, Marriage Story. That was a ooh, that was a film. I mean, it was a great film, but damn, that was uh just sad to see overall. Like, I mean, but I had to give a specific shout out to Alan Alda for his role, his supporting role in Marriage Story. What that was that was a heartbreaking performance, I felt. And like, to me, I just felt like that was like, he felt like almost too real of a character, in the sense of him being the lawyer, but the more, you know, cheaper lawyer, the more the guy who seems to have, you know, put his heart in his business because, you know, he went through a similar thing, marriage, divorce. And oh man, that's just wow. That performance. Anyways, um but yeah, Marriage Story was at the very least great. The Undefeated, John Wayne. There was a lot of John Wayne movies I've watched this year for the first time, just because my mom was such a big fan of John Wayne. So every now and then she's like, "Hey, you want to watch a John Wayne film?" And I'm like, "Sure." Got nothing better to do. I watched Hatari. A Lady Takes a Chance, which also has John Wayne. And then I decided to finally finish the 50 Shades of Grey trilogy movies, because I saw the first one several years ago. I forget when, 2016, 2017. I can't remember. I think I rated it for one of my best and worst movies. I forget which year. But the first one, literally the first one, the only thing that was good about it, I felt, was the music. And I just felt it was, well, I mean, you could check out my review of 50 Shades of Grey, because I did a just watched review of it. But 50 Shades Darker and 50 Shades Free was uh, slightly worse, slightly funnier, slightly less funnier. Like, it's definitely a bad trilogy. Why am I leaking nose fluids? Second and third one was kind of unnecessary and kind of worse. Anyways, and then to get 50 Shades of Grey out of my head, I watched Sausage Party for the first time. That, wow, I wasn't expecting that movie. I that's the perfect way to end. If you do watch the 50 Shades of Grey trilogy, watch Sausage Party. Much better. Makes up for the hours you lost on 50 Shades of Grey. Can't believe they accomplished what they did for an adult animated film. Holy cow. Well done. Had me laughing out loud all over the place, and was surprisingly well done. I think, yeah, it's Sony Animated Pictures, so I forget what other films they've done, but they didn't cheap out on this film. I'll say that in the terms of animation. It's well enough for what it was. I don't know what the budget was for the film, but then I decided to watch my first Vinegar Syndrome boutique label film. In case you didn't know, there's, you know, for example, there's Criterion Collection, Arrow, Twilight Time. Unfortunately, just are now stopping altogether. It's unfortunate they're going, but they won't be around anymore. Shout Factory, Scream Factory, Vinegar Syndrome. They specifically were a little more on the if you see their selection of films that they offer and restorations and all that, they're a little more focused on the more historic adult films side. And but there was a couple of they do releases that aren't necessarily pornographic, but they do have some that I was interested in seeing, and one of them was Hell Comes to Frogtown, mainly because I really liked They Live with Roddy Piper, and I was curious to see another film with he's in, and he's the main guy in Hell Comes to Frogtown. And that was some campy B movie fun right there. Hell Comes to Frogtown. And then my dad wanted to watch one of the movies I got for him because I know he was a really big fan of based on a true story, either, police, firefighters, people doing their job, sort of type movies. And this is a movie he wanted to see in theaters, but he never got around to it. So I picked this up for him for Father's Day a couple of years ago. And that was Only the Brave. So he wanted to watch it together, like father and son. And Only the Brave was a pretty good film. I was not, interesting thing is, like, I wasn't aware of what exactly happened to these fire. Like, I kind of remember hearing about these firefighters perishing during a forest fire or land fire, and to go into this film kind of knowing that something bad's gonna happen, people are not gonna make it out, but not knowing exactly the details of the story was definitely a interesting experience. And it was done well enough as a film. I'm still shocked that many died. Miles Teller and Josh Brolin and Jeff Bridges, and the cast does a great job of the film, and the film is structured well enough and done well enough that I felt it worked for what it was. Bull Durham, that was another film that I got for his birthday. Interesting baseball movie, I felt. My mom wanted to watch The Comancheros. I watched The Comancheros. See, my problem with John Wayne movies is some of them is like only the ones that really stick out or I remember are kind of the ones I feel were better films. Like, for example, The Undefeated and The Comancheros. Okay, so The Undefeated I actually kind of remember. That's the one with the North and South and Civil War, after Civil War and going towards the border, and they sort of meet up, but the war has been over already. And then The Comancheros, if I remember correctly now, I didn't really like the specific ending of The Undefeated, but I did praise and respected the ending for doing what it did with Undefeated, because I was expecting that sort of ending. The Comancheros, I actually can't remember exactly for the life of me. I kind of remember, kind of not. If I had to rate John Wayne films, Comancheros wouldn't be as highly rated because, I don't remember it that much. Where, like, Hatari, I remember because that's the one movie that takes place sort of in Africa and them catching animals. That's why I remember that film. I watched What Dreams May Come, and that was an unexpected film from beginning to end. I wasn't not knowing anything about it and just blindly going into a film. Oh boy, what fun to have with that. What Dreams May Come. Holy crap. Especially given what the plot is about, knowing what happens to Robin Williams later on in his life, and watching this movie, it kind of made it harder to watch, actually, in some sense. But it was a beautifully well done visually, specifically a couple scenes, and it kind of felt like almost like a Terry Gilliam film throughout. And even though it's not a Terry Gilliam film, it definitely felt like it was inspired by Terry Gilliam's work. Around this time in the year, this is where the sports venues really started to get canceled and all that. So there's no more basketball, there's no more baseball, everything's postponed sporting wise. So I thought that would be an excellent excuse to go through all 100 years of Olympics films that Criterion released that I picked up, I forget when, within the last year. During a sale, I found it for, I think, on Amazon. Yeah, Amazon had it for a very low price considering its
Amazon.ca Canada. And so I'm like, I have to step on this deal, even though I'm not a really big fan of sports in general. I do love a couple sports movies, like my favorite sports movie of all time, Rudy. Love that movie. I think it's the most inspirational film ever, and just was it's such a great film to watch. Like it always picks you up and motivate. It's the most motivational film I felt of like all the sports, because sports movies in general should be motivational, but I just felt Rudy was the most inspiring movie from what they did. I mean, the score and all that, but enough talk about Rudy. So with all the sports being canceled, I'm like, I have, was it 30 plus discs of Olympics, one from all the years that they were able to restore and actually they had footage of. And so I've been slowly during this pandemic making my way through the 100 years of Olympics box set. And so I watched. I didn't list the names of the actual films themselves, but I went through the disc: Stockholm, 1912; Chamonix, 1924; Paris, 1924; Saint Moritz, 1928; Amsterdam, 1928. Garmisch, Partenkirchen, 1936. I'm probably butchering the names of some of these cities and places. Berlin, 1936, which I think they include the Olympia film. That is the overall, I mean, it's a pretty cool experience watching history just go by just from the same sort of event every couple of years. But people come and go, competitors come and go. What was the best 4 or 8 years ago, it gets beaten again later on, and it's just really cool history of film to go through. And if you're any sort of fan of sports, I definitely would highly recommend it. Criterion did a fantastic job just from the discs I've seen of the restoration and all that. For me, the Berlin one was specifically more interesting just because I've it's so weird seeing in a historic sense of the Olympic Committee and seeing the Nazi flag flying with all the other flags of the world. It's scary. It's a bit of foreshadowing, because remember, this is 1936. This is before the war and all that, World War II. And it's just so weird being like, oh my gosh, there's Hitler at these Olympic Games, major event that, and it's what was the best part of the Olympia film, like in the sense that, yeah, okay, the Nazi propaganda, they put so much money into it. It's just very big propaganda, and the fact that they used the Olympics as sort of an excuse to show off to the rest of the world. The thing I found the best part of the Olympics Berlin is Jesse Owens and his amazing accomplishment being first placed in general. Like, no one, he was untouchable record wise in the Berlin 1936 Olympics, and seeing him do amazing Olympic work in such a interesting setting, like for me, that really stood out. Though I will say the Olympia film is a little bit you can definitely tell that some aspects of it was not live filmed. You can tell they reshot some things just to make it more dramatic, or like when they're running in the marathon, there's no way during the marathon they set up the camera so it's like right under where the chest is of the person running as they're going like this, and it's like there's no way they did that during the actual Olympics. They obviously filmed like it's as a documentary. The 1936 Olympic Games was very, I felt, interesting to watch out of all of them so far. Then I watched Lady Bird, and Lady Bird was great. I felt weirdly original, but very, very real at the same time. Then I watched How the West Was Won, which I have seen parts of, but I've never actually sat and watched the whole thing from beginning to end. And we saw it in the special. Where's the John Wayne section? There it is. Oh. Cinerama. I think that's what it's called. Curved screen smiley box version of the film. That's the version we watched from beginning to end. It tries to basically, with that version of the Blu-ray, it's trying to make it bring back or try to accurately represent what the free screen effect was, because what the original feeder run for How the West Was Won was free screen. So you got the one big screen in the front, and you got the two basically almost same size screens on the left and right. And so when you're sitting in the feeder, you got this free screens long film to look at, and that was kind of sort of a bit of a gimmick, but it was a very nice looking gimmick. And unfortunately, because of ratios and all that technical aspects in that, it sort of died off, because not every feeder is going to install an extra two screens in the same feeder, when that space could have been done for more separate screen feeders. So but that was cool. Then I watched London 1948, Saint Moritz 1948. Then I watched The Cowboys. I knew going in with The Cowboys the major spoiler for the film, especially if you're a fan of John Wayne. You'd kind of know what the Cowboys sort of means as a film in his filmography, and I kind of knew that spoiler going into it. It was still, I thought, was a great, well done film, and it definitely stood out, especially with all the children as sort of the main supporting cast for the John Wayne film. The Usual Suspects. Yeah, that was the first time I ever watched that film. And I thought it was great for what it was. The only problem is I felt like, because I did not have this movie spoiled for me, but if I did a just watched video review of this film, I would have loved to have done that, because I called the ending so like before going into it, because I look at I didn't read the description on the back of the Blu-ray. I just saw who was in the movie, and I'm like, okay, if there has to be a major reveal or whatever, it's going to involve this actor. Not saying who it is. If you haven't seen The Usual Suspects, see that movie before it gets spoiled for you. But it is, I felt it was a little bit predictable. That was overall a great film, and I can see why it was such a great film, but I don't know how well it's going to hold up on a second viewing. So I watched The Killing Fields. What a strange mix of movies you got here. The Killing Fields, based on the true story. The Killing Fields was a really well done film, and it's pretty sad what happened to the I think he's technically a supporting actor for the film, but I think, yeah, he won the best Oscar for supporting actor. It's pretty sad, tragically, what happened to him, which might have been he might have been murdered as a result of the film, or because of, in relation to, is it the Cambodian War or genocide? Yeah, so it's the coverage of the Cambodia 1975 Khmer Rouge uprising. I didn't really realize something like this or happen. I mean, that's the great thing about movies and based on true story or inspired by movies, is that they always go out and open your eyes to other things. And my camera just stopped recording for some reason. If you never heard of Abraham Lincoln, And you go see Steven Spielberg's Lincoln, and it's the first time you've ever been exposed to Lincoln. If that movie generates interest in Lincoln for you, you then, after the movie's over, you want to look up the history. You probably start off with the Wikipedia page, just as a, not as a word for word exactly what happened, but it gives you a glance overview of the career, what has happened to him, and all that. And then from there, if you're really excited to delve into history, there's several books and other things, records and pictures I think they have of him and stuff like that. Like, there's a lot of history that gets opened up, and it's sort of, movies in general is inspired or based on sort of give you a slice of what you're going to get into. And if it generates interest in the subject matter. Before seeing The Killing Fields, I didn't really know about the Cambodia, the Rouge Uprising, and all that. And after seeing the movie and discovering sort of history and that, it opened my eyes to a situation like that. Like, Only the Brave, the movie made me want to research what actually happened and all that, because you gotta remember, the movie's not exactly, I mean, some movies tried to be the best they can, the most accurate as they can. But movies in general are always never going to be totally 100% accurate. Even documentaries, even real footage, has been altered in some way that it's not entirely 100% accurate. Like, another example I would say is the Rolling Stones' "Gimme Shelter." There's in the documentary, which is a live action sort of concert, at one point you see somebody get on screen, in a sense. Yeah, I mean, he died off screen. I think after the ambulance took it away, but you see the thing that caused him to die on screen. And if you watch that film, you would think it happened at that specific moment in the concert. But if what it happened was, in the movie, they actually edited it in such a way that it made it look like it happened at a different part of the concert. Because the Rolling Stones, when that person was killed, they weren't playing that song. I forget which song it was they're playing in the movie when that happened. They were actually on a different song, on a different verse. And so the documentary itself, even though it's true, that's what happened, it's not 100% accurate. And you also got to remember that with all documentaries in general, even the ones that try to be as truth as possible, there's always either something, either misinterpretation, or things are twisted or turned in such a way to imply this or imply that. And you just got to remember, that's what film does. And films can very easily do this. And you don't really want this to happen. You just gotta be aware of this when watching films and documentaries and anything in general. Always question what you're seeing, because it may or may not be coming from a place that's honest or truthful, Just be aware of that. Anyways, that was a bit of a rant. Elvis, That's the Way It Is. I saw that, and then I saw Elvis on tour, back to back, and that was a fun concert evening documentary thing. Cool. I think the best parts of those movies was the more behind the scenes aspects. Even though it was kind of cool that Elvis on tour had Martin Scorsese helping on as like assistant editor for montages or something like that. I did feel like Elvis, That's the Way It Is was the better film overall. Elvis on tour had my favorite Elvis Presley song recording wise, and that's for me, my favorite Elvis Presley song is his version of, or I don't know, because I think it's a mishmash of a couple different songs, but that Elvis sort of made into one song, and that is the An American Trilogy. Love that. That was my favorite song. And in Elvis on tour, He does the actual performance that audio was taken from, and it's just seeing it live and the emotion, the band, and all that's awesome. That was probably my favorite moment from the two movies. But Elvis, That's the Way It Is, was a much, I felt, better concert film overall. Though Elvis on tour was pretty cool, seeing multiple takes and seeing split screen and all that. And then I watched Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I really, that's only the second movie I've seen with Paul Newman and Robert Redford. The first one being The Sting, and I loved The Sting. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid isn't exactly my favorite of their films, but it still was a great film. Especially, I love that opening, that introduction for the Sundance Kid. And some of the montages in the middle. Like, there's a whole point in this movie where there's a time lapse, but it's just old pictures and old, almost ragtime type or old time music. And Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid is a great film. Anyways, and then to pair it off with another film I think came out the same year that's also Western, The Wild Bunch. Sam Peckinpah, I can't pronounce his last name, but he did Straw Dogs, and I saw Straw Dogs, and so going into it, I was expecting, I guess it would be a little more violent, but I wasn't expecting, like, in that first opening commotion, I was shocked for a Western, because at this point I'm only really used to the John Wayne Western. Seeing the violence that was in The Wild Bunch took me by surprise, because I was like, wow, this is borderline spaghetti Western almost type violence, and seeing it in sort of a big Hollywood movie done in that sort of realism, and it's just it took me by surprise. And a very bloody ending for a Western, I would say. Anyways, and then I saw Zootopia. That was a great film. Then I saw Oslo, 1952, The Greatest Showman, which, once again, I don't really agree from what I've heard of the true icon that the story is based around. But it was a nice musical overall. I saw Weird Al's UHF. Weird Al, I love, but his TV show and the one movie that I've seen now of his, don't worry, guys, don't get me wrong, it has its moments, but a lot of it is especially in terms of humor and all that, but it did give me some chuckles, so I felt it was worth it overall. And as a fan of Weird Al, it was neat seeing him in sort of a movie, feature-length movie type thing. And then I saw FM, the story of Los Angeles radio, featuring a lot of music. I thought that was a great overall film, and it was neat seeing the guy from Blazing Saddles, because I only really know him from Blazing Saddles, the sheriff of Rockridge, but seeing him in a role that wasn't that role, that was great. Even though it was a very minor role, I felt overall. But FM was a pretty cool movie for what it was. Then I watched Peppermint. Bad film overall. The only reason I actually picked up the movie was because I was a fan of Jennifer Gardner. Jennifer Gardner was amazing in Alias, and Alias is such a great show, and I cannot stop praising Alias. I'm a big fan of J.J. Abrams as a filmmaker, but more on the TV side. I felt he should really just more stick to TV shows. Granted, if he did, we would have never gotten Super 8, and I love Super 8. And Star Trek, the first one was amazing. Second one was half the movie the first one was, and I was already happy with what we got with the second Star Trek. And he did Force Awakens, which was good enough for bringing back a franchise as tough as Star Wars. And Rise of Skywalker is the worst film J.J. Abrams done. But I don't know why I'm going into J.J. Abrams, but I just felt like any excuse to talk about J.J. Abrams TV shows is a good excuse to rant on it. Lost is amazing. Alcatraz is amazing, but it got canceled. Person of Interest. Oh, man. Alias was, for me, the first thing I've ever watched of Jennifer Gardner or J.J. Abrams, and that show has always stuck with me as one of the best, if not the best show. Lost is amazing, too. As you can see, Peppermint makes me not want to talk about Peppermint. But Jennifer Garner was probably the better part of the film, but movie itself was eh. Then I saw Helsinki, 1952. Cortina d'Ampezzo, 1956. Melbourne, 1956. Then I saw Whiplash. Oh my gosh. I loved La La Land. La La Land was the first Damien Chazelle movie I've ever seen. And I believe right now it's sitting in my top 50 films for favorite films for La La Land. And then I saw First Man, when that came out in theaters. But I never really got around to watching Whiplash until now. And Whiplash, oh my gosh, that was the most intense film about musicians I've seen. Oh man, J.K. Simmons, holy crap in this movie. And Miles Teller does a really great job as well, working off of J.K. Simmons. But J.K. Simmons is brutal in this movie. My gosh. And the ending song, that's the best version of that song I have ever heard performed, whatever, film, movie, TV, live, ever. I'm not going to say what song it is because that would be a spoiler. And then I decided randomly I was going to have, let's try watching a whole bunch of films from a filmmaker that I have a lot of movies of, but I've never actually gone around to watching. So I decided Steven Soderbergh for some strange reason. And so I watched all the following films in one day. I saw Sex, Lies, and Videotapes, King of the Hill, Chi, Part 1 and 2, The Informant. Yeah, I watched that all in one day. That was pretty great. Overall, experience-wise, I could definitely see why he's a bit of an underrated filmmaker, but at the same time, very hidden filmmaker. I felt like in the terms of style and all that. He's not like Quentin Tarantino, where when you see one of his films, you're watching a Quentin Tarantino film. With Steven Soderbergh, I don't really know you're watching a Steven Soderbergh film until you see his name in the credits, And those were the ones Steven Soderbergh films I've never seen up to this point, because at this point I've already seen the Ocean's 11 trilogy. And I've seen Magic Mike 1 and 2. Granted, Steven Soderbergh didn't direct the second Magic Mike. He executive produced it. But the main reason I wanted to do this marathon for Steven Spielberg, because I felt I really wanted to give me an excuse to watch Contagion, which was supposed to be the last one of that marathon, but I never got around to watching it because, well, let's face it, what used to have been a movie that came out several years ago and was like not laughed at per se, but was just like, well, pandemic that just suddenly comes around and all that, and that's not gonna happen. And then what do you know, it's 2020 and we got the coronavirus pandemic, and everything is fine. I'm just that dog in that photo comic, the one with the house on fire. Everything is fine. This is fine. Just drinking my coffee. Making an excuse of, I'm going to watch all the Steven Soderbergh films I haven't seen would give me a little more push to watch Contagion. And even then I decided, it's a little too late. I shouldn't watch Contagion. So I still haven't watched Contagion, but I'm really hoping tonight to watch Contagion. Because the movie was very heavily researched what would happen in this type of pandemic happened or whatever, and so the movie might have some information that maybe I haven't seen, or maybe it'll bring something to my attention that of what's going on right now that we haven't been looking at, so I hope to watch Contagion very soon. Last two movies I've watched recently was Brewster's Millions with Richard Pryor and John Candy. That was a fun little movie. And then I watched Alfred Hitchcock's To Catch a Thief. And I just want to put a little rant in here. It's not really a good rant. It's not really a bad rant. But my first time ever watching To Catch a Thief, I picked up what I believed was going to be another great boutique label, Paramount Presents. They decided, Paramount was like, hey, we're seeing the success of Criterion Collection and Collectors and Scream Shout Factory and all that, and boutique labels in general. And they wanted to get in on the action by having their own version collectible thing with the number and all that. And Alfred Hitchcock's To Catch a Thief was one of the first ones they announced, even though it was number 3 of their line of collectible things. And I was super excited because I'm like, man, Paramount is a big company. They have lots of money and stuff. They could very easily put a lot of stuff into these and make these one of the best versions of the movies to ever own. And from the picture, I was expecting sort of a little digibook with a slipcover and maybe a poster, that little piece of paper it folds out, and hey, you got a poster and that. But we ended up with this crap, which is a slipcover that opens up, and there's the original poster for To Catch a Thief, and slipcover, it doesn't come across the poster. It's not an actual poster you can hang up. I mean, you could technically hang up the slipcover, but that would be weird. You got a plastic clear case, which kind of looks weird with the slipcover that they decided for it. And yeah, I mean, you got a nice inside. You got nothing on the disc. It looks just like one of those discs you would find in a $5 bin. The transfer on the film is sourced from they promised, and I quote, Paramount Pictures Home Entertainment is proud to spotlight a new line of Blu-ray releases for collectors and fans. Paramount presents, from celebrated classics to film lover favorites, each title comes directly from the studio's renowned library spanning over 100 years of storytelling. These films have never looked better on Blu-ray, each lovingly remastered from 4K film transfers featuring never-before-seen bonus content and exclusive collectible packaging. As I pre-ordered this immediately, along with the first free Paramount Present lines, which include Elvis Presley's King Creole and Fatal Attraction. And I was super excited for this, and then after receiving it, and before even watching it, I heard reviews of people who got early copies, and looks like Paramount Pictures did do a 4K scan of the original negative, but then they really altered and adjusted the film that they restored. And they basically, I think it's called DNR it. It's where they digitally remove film grain scratches and that, but anything that makes it look like a film they got rid of. So I've never seen To Catch a Thief, but hearing that, I was a little bit worried because I'm like, oh, that's terrible. Because, I mean, what's the point of doing a 4K restoration of the original film if you're just going to digitally enhance it to the point where it's not even an original film anymore? It looks new and artificial in some ways. And I saw the movie, and I love the movie. But the presentation of the movie, yes, did look a little too new for what the film was. A lot of it was blurry in the background, like really blurry, like noticeably blurry. I had a big screen TV, so I had like you know, this big 70-inch type TV where you can really see the details of stuff, and I could really notice just how blurry some of the background scenes are. But granted, they didn't really distract me too much because anything that was close up or anything that was meant to be in focus looked fine for me as far as I could tell. I'm not a total film crazy person. I'm not really technical savvy, so but I would prefer try to have the most original version of the experience as possible. And this movie, yeah, okay, they really digitally remove stuff in the terms of grain and all that, and it does look a little weird in certain things, but it's not horrible. Yes, it's bad in the terms of overall, but the actual anything that's in focus looks fine as far as eyes, casual eyes are concerned. So this release is not terrible. Yes, it is a bad release, but it's not terrible. So I'm only slightly defending this. You remember when I said in the thing description for what they says on the back here about the bonus features that are exclusive? They only have one new special feature, and it's like I watched it. It was like a 7 or 10 minute, less than 10 minute featurette of some guy sort of talking about the film for a little bit with some photos thrown in. That's it. That's the special feature. That's what's new in this special Paramount Presents thing. And it has 2 or 3 other older special features, but apparently the older Blu-ray release of To Catch a Thief has a ton of special features that are missing in this version. And it's like, if Paramount owned the previous release, why is there less special features on the version that's supposed to be a collector's item? And apparently even in the audio, I heard that they're missing some of the audio choices. Like, I think they don't have the English mono audio. Like, if you wanted to watch this movie with the original audio, you can't do that in English. You can do that in French and Spanish, but you can't watch the English version of this film in the original 2.0 mono audio. You have to watch it in the 5.1 new surround sound mix, which they didn't really have surround sound back then for movie releases. So they didn't really mix that way. That's obviously a newer mix for a movie such as this. And I haven't checked out the other Paramount Presents releases, but as far as I'm concerned, the only good thing about this Paramount Presents label is their choices of movies. For example, the first 3, I don't have any of those movies. I never owned To Catch a Thief previously, and then I never owned a Fatal Attraction or King Creole, the Elvis Presley movie. And so it would be nice having those finally added to my Blu-ray collection. And I think they've also announced Pretty in Pink, Ghost, Days of Thunder. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what else there was. But all those movies I haven't picked up yet. So Flashdance, that's another one. I don't have any of those movies. So for me, this collection's pretty decent to pick up. But if they're really gonna, I mean, what's the point of doing the 4K scan if they're just gonna really alter it afterwards? I just hope they didn't. I cut out again. Oh my gosh. So like I was saying, they had some really good choices in what films to do for their line, but the lack of special features that like, I don't really care about new special features. Like, add 1 or 2, that would be great. The more special features the better, but if you have to get rid of some of the older special features, that's kapooey. That's poop. That's crap. And the only one that so far has been a double that's been announced is Airplane. And I love Airplane, but I already have the less than $10 version of both Airplane 1 and 2 on, I think it's the same Blu-ray disc. Very cheap. And I love Airplane. Airplane's one of my favorite movies of all time. So them doing the release, I'm like, okay, I'll pick it up just so I can have a good compare of an older Blu-ray release and their newer ones, just to see how well it is. Because I'm sure it was well-meaning, but they didn't have to. They could have just scanned the original version and then cleaned up maybe some of the scratches of the film and restore it that way. But they didn't have to digitally remove noise and all that. Noise is pretty natural depending on the film, and depending on how they shot it, you know? That's just my 2 cents. But the Paramount Presents line, I'm still up in the air on if it's really that great or really that bad. So far, just from judging of To Catch a Thief, it's bad, but it's not terrible. And I enjoyed To Catch a Thief in this presentation, though a part of me wants to pick up the older Blu-ray release just so I can have something to compare to. But that'll be further down the line, because who knows, maybe there'll be a better version of To Catch a Thief coming out eventually. But yeah, so that's you are all caught up to everything that I have watched this year for the first time. And so if you don't really like my recommendation early on of just watching what you have that you haven't seen yet, and you want to try to do what Mitchell has been doing, if you can catch up and watch all those films I've listed, then you can see what I've experienced in a sense. So that's good luck, I will say, because I don't think not many people would even have access to all these films that I've listed. So anyways, I don't know what video this ends up being, but I kind of wanted to try out this sort of setup, because I'm thinking if I am gonna do a just watched review, I'm figuring this is a very nice setup to do it simply. Just a reminder to wash your hands. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for watching. I want you to have a nice day or night or whatever time you watch this. Have a nice whatever. Pajamas. Nerf this.